So, guys, we've been in this series for a couple weeks now called The Whole Point, right? If you've been here, you might remember, or you might not, because, remembering things is hard, okay? But we've been talking about what the whole point of faith is, right? What the whole point of coming to church, of knowing Jesus, of pursuing Jesus. What's the whole point of all this, right? And, last week, if you were here, you might remember we talked about how what God thinks matters most, right? It doesn't matter what other people think about us. It doesn't matter their opinions of us or whatever, because what God thinks about us matters most. And the week before that, we talked about freedom and how, because of Jesus, we have freedom to live our lives, and we don't have to worry about, it kind of tied right in the next one, we don't have to worry about what they think about us because Jesus has given us freedom in him, right? And this week, we're talking about making choices and decisions in life, okay? And sometimes we make really poor choices, right? Does anybody ever make like a bad decision? Anybody? No? Yes. Yep. Me too. All the time. Like every day, right? What did I do? I'll tell you what I did. Okay. It's a great question. So, I make lots of bad choices, but one of the poor decisions I made was one time, right, I was at this summer camp. Who's ever been to summer camp? Raise your hand if you've ever been to a summer camp. Yeah? Okay, so you kind of know what they're like, right? You're at a summer camp. I'm there with my friends, and I was with, like, my three best buds, right? Their names were Jet, Noah, and Dom. Dom actually works here. He's the 4th and 5th grade pastor, so you can meet him. He's kind of funny. But yeah, so I was with these guys, right? And we had just came from the dodgeball tournament. We had lost because we were not athletic or good at dodgeball, obviously. And I was like probably like this tall then. Like I was much younger, so I was a lot shorter. So we were coming back, and hey, Brody, could you sit down? Yeah. Thank you. So we were coming back from dodgeball, and we're walking down this path, right? It's this long path back from like the gym building to like the room we were staying in, right? And along the path, there was a creek, right? Everybody say creek. Everybody say creek. Creek. Good job. Good work. That's what I like to hear. Okay. So, nice. Okay. So this creek, right? It's like, bigger than like a creek in Parker or whatever. Like, we don't really have creeks here, but not like a river. It's like, I don't know, maybe like 8 to 10 feet across, like maybe from like here to like where the guitar is or something. I don't know. It's like that far, right? And it's right along the path. And so this path is super long. It's like a mile long, right? Or at least it feels like a mile long from the building to where the path crosses the river, right? The little creek. There's a little bridge down there. But our building is like, let's say, okay, so imagine I'm right here. Our building is like right where Caleb's sitting, and there's this creek. And the bridge is like all the way like outside, like on the road out there, right? So we don't want to walk all the way there. So we're like, okay, we'll just jump across the little creek because it's a creek. It's fine. We can jump across it. But I was small and unathletic, as I still am. So we're doing that, and we're like, okay, we'll just jump across it. And my first friend goes, his name's Jet, like an airplane. So he goes, and he jumps across it, and he's fine because he's, like, way taller than I am. He's like, huh? Yeah, I know I was short, okay? I'm not anymore. But he goes, and he's fine. He's chilling. And then our next friend, Dom, jumps across it, and he's fine, too, because he's pretty tall. And then Noah goes across it, and he, like, on the edge of it, so, like, if this was the edge of the other side of the creek, he, like, catches his foot and, like, kind of falls forward like that. That's what Noah did, right? And so I see that, and I was like, if that happened to Noah, I don't know if I'm going to make it. I'm not very good at jumping. But I was like, okay, whatever. I'm going to do it anyway because I don't want to walk all the way down there, right? I made the decision to just jump. And so I ran up. And I'm going to run up, and, like, so if this is the edge of the creek, I, like, missed the step and just fell in completely, like, right into the creek. And I fell in, and I, like, cut up my knee, and I had my phone in the pocket. It was, like, my new phone at the time. It was, I don't know, whatever it was, like, the iPhone, like, 4 or something like that. I had that in my pocket, and it got ruined. And the worst part about it, right, so I got it all wet, and, like, the screen cracked and stuff. But then the flashlight was stuck on forever. Like, it would not turn off. Whenever, like, a phone died, it would just, as soon as it turned back on, the light would just come back on. The flashlight was just on forever. I ruined a phone, yeah. And then that was not good because that was expensive. And then I was really hurt. And then the rest of the camp kind of sucked because I was hurt. And it just wasn't as fun, all because I didn't want to walk the extra, like, 50 steps to cross the little creek, right? That's a dumb decision I made a while ago, but kind of a funny one. I should have swam. What was I thinking? Like a mermaid. Yeah, I am like a mermaid. I should have swam. I don't know why I didn't do that. See, but that's the thing about decisions is a lot of times you just make them and you don't really think about what could happen or what could go wrong, or you don't really think through what you could do better. I didn't think through swimming like a mermaid, I didn't think about that. I just kind of did it not knowing what would happen, and then I had to face the consequences because I didn't think about my decision before I made it, right? Oh, she was very mad. But she was more like, you're an idiot. That's your problem. But because she wasn't really that mad, Not for a while because I had to buy a new one, and that's expensive, and I didn't have very much money. But I didn't get grounded because that was kind of my own fault, I didn't get grounded. But it happens to us, right? You probably also make bad decisions, right? Maybe you don't fall in creeks, but maybe you make other bad decisions, or you just make decisions a lot, right? And sometimes they don't always go the way you think they're going to go, right? Whether it's trying to jump across something, or maybe it's like you decide to not study for a test and then you fail and you're like, oh, I didn't think that would happen. What? To cross it. It's a very clear story. It's fine. You're fine. You're fine. We can talk about it more after if you want, right? And I didn't make the wise choice, right? The wise choice would be to just walk to the bridge or whatever, but I didn't do that. And a lot of times we don't make the wise choices, right? Because wise choices are really hard to make because you have to think about them for a while before you make a wise choice. You have to just stop and think about it, and nobody wants to do that, right? So you kind of have two options, though. You can either make the wise choice or the less wise choice, which is sometimes a bad choice. Sometimes it's just kind of like a neutral choice, but a lot of times it's a bad choice that leads to something bad happening to you in the future, right? Maybe you stay up all night watching something on Netflix, and then you're super tired in school and fail a test the next day or something, right? But you were like, I just want to stay up and watch this. You didn't really think through the choice until the next day when you're really tired in class and you couldn't do it. Or maybe your parents tell you you need to clean your room or do something like that, or empty the dishwasher, and then you don't want to do it, so you just don't do it, and then you get grounded, and then you can't hang out with your friends that weekend. But when you were thinking, I don't want to empty the dishwasher, you weren't worried about hanging out that weekend because you didn't think that far ahead, right? Making wise choices isn't an easy thing to do, right? It takes a lot of stopping and thinking, and nobody likes to stop and think, right? No, me neither. Okay. So all these choices, like we just said, they all have consequences, right? If you choose to not empty the dishwasher when you were told to, then you're going to get grounded. Or if you choose to not study for your test, then you might fail it. Or there's also the good ones, If you choose to go and talk to a new kid at school, maybe you just found your new best friend, right? There's a lot of good consequences and bad consequences, but each choice, something will come from it eventually. Even if you don't realize it, something is impacted every time you make a choice. Yeah, like me falling on my face because I chose to jump. That's what happened, Not right now, maybe later. But, what? Huh? Okay, cool. So, oh, thank you. That was very kind. Okay, so what are we supposed to do, right? What are we going to do if we know that we want to make wise choices? Because nobody likes the bad consequences. Nobody likes being grounded or being stuck somewhere that they don't want to be, or being, having no friends, or getting in trouble at school, or being in detention, or being suspended. Nobody likes getting in trouble and having to deal with those negative consequences. So what are we going to do? Because making wise choices isn't an easy thing to do. It's not as easy as just being like, I'm just going to start being a genius all the time and making the good choices. So how are we going to do that? Even in a small way, right? Well, luckily, we can look to the Bible and our friend Paul. Everybody say Paul. Paul, right? We're going back to the same book we've been looking at this whole series, to the book of Galatians. Everybody say Galatians. That was terrible. That was awful. Everybody say Galatians. Okay, one more time. Everybody say Galatians. One more time. Everybody say Galatians. Oh, there we go. Okay, now say it like an alien. That was good. That was good. See, I think it sounds like an alien word, but Galatians sounds like an alien planet or something. But this book to the people in Galatia, right? Paul is writing them, and he's answering all kinds of questions they have, right? They're new Christians, and they're just kind of they're trying to figure out what the whole point of following Jesus is. And he's encouraging them to make wise choices. A lot of the people in Galatia were making poor choices and doing dumb things. and then having to suffer the consequences. So he's trying to encourage them to do smarter things and make wise choices, right? And so here's what he says to them first. We're going to look at a couple things from him. First, he says, ready, guys? Look at the screen. We're going to read. Ready? Everybody together. On three. We're going to read this whole thing together. Everybody, ready? 1, 2, 3. You will always harvest what you plant. Great reading, guys. Great job. Great work. Okay, so he says you will always harvest what you plant, right? And what that means, right, because I don't think most of you guys plant. Does anybody plant plants out here? You do? Okay, and what happened when you planted the flower seed? Okay, well, never mind. She's not good at, who's good at planting things? You are? What did you plant? A cucumber? And what happened after you planted the cucumber seeds? It grew? What did it grow? A cucumber. Wow. A cucumber seeds grew a cucumber, right? This is what he's saying. He's saying if you plant cucumber seeds, a cucumber is going to grow. If you plant cucumber seeds, you're not going to grow an apple tree. That's what he's saying. He's saying you get what you put in, right? You get out what you put in. That's kind of the idea here. If you're planting good seeds, is what he would say, which would be wise choices, making the right decision. If you're planting those good seeds, good will come out of that. But if you're making bad choices and planting these bad seeds, then bad things are going to come out of that. The consequences we were talking about, the consequences to our actions, right? So we probably don't want to grow bad plants, right? We want good seeds. We want good things to come from our choices, right? To like tomatoes, exactly. We don't want, what's a bad fruit? I don't know. Eggplant. Yeah, we don't want eggplants. We want tomatoes, okay? So how do we grow tomatoes, right? How do we make these wise choices? So we're going to go on. And he tells us why it's so important that we do try and grow tomatoes, not eggplants, right? Why we do try and get good things to come out of the good seeds that we're planting, right? So check out this next verse. Who wants to read it? Who wants to come up and read it? It's a long one. Okay, do you know how to read? Perfect. Come on up. You got to go all the way up. What's your name? Lillian. Okay, here you go, Lillian.
Those who live only to satisfy their own sinful nature will harvest decay and death from that sinful nature. But those who live to please the Spirit will harvest everlasting life from the Spirit.
Great job. Great job. Good reading. Good reading. Great work. Great work. Okay. That was loud. Whoever just screamed. Okay, so he says, those who live only to satisfy their own sinful nature. So what does that mean? Those who make decisions based on selfish reasons, right? If all your decisions are just based on what's going to make me happy right now, then he says you will harvest. So if those are the seeds you're planting, selfish seeds, right? Bad decisions, things like that, poor choices, selfish things like, choosing not to empty the dishwasher because that doesn't sound like fun. He's saying those kind of things will end in decay and death. Okay, that's kind of harsh. He's saying if you make bad choices, you will die. That's pretty serious. That's kind of harsh, right? It's kind of sad. But that's what he's saying. That's what happens. What? Yeah, but he's talking about like a death that is eternal, right? He's not talking about just the right now. He's talking about a bigger thing than that, something bigger than that. Because then he goes on to say, if you plant the good seeds, right? He says, those who please the Spirit, so those who make wise choices and make their decisions based on what they think God would want, they will harvest everlasting life from the Spirit, right? Those who follow Jesus, who pursue Jesus with their lives, who accept Jesus into their life, they will harvest everlasting life, right? Not a plant that's ever going to fade or die, but something that lasts forever in him. How will you know if it's good or bad? Well, there's this cool thing called the Spirit, okay? The Holy Spirit. He helps you tell you if things are bad, right? Sometimes, if you know Jesus, and even if you don't, you probably still have this thing called a conscience, and you kind of know if you're making a good choice or a bad choice, right? Like if I was to throw this pen really hard in his eye, I would know that that's like a bad thing to do, right? I would just naturally know I'm not going to do it, but that would be a bad thing, right? You know if you're making good or bad choices. You might not know in the moment, but when you look back on it and you're sitting in detention, you can think, yeah, I probably shouldn't have thrown the pencil at the teacher's face or something like that. I probably shouldn't have jumped out the window of the bus, You're going to know eventually whether it was a good choice or a bad choice. So that's how you know, to answer your question. But the reality is that Paul is getting at here is he's saying that you have a choice. You can either plant things that will lead to decay and death, or you can plant things that will lead to everlasting life, right? That's the main idea here. I want you guys to know that you have the freedom to make wise choices, right? That's the main point. You have the freedom to make wise choices. Whatever you do every day, you get up and you get to make the choices in your life, right? You don't get to choose everything. A lot of things are probably set up for you. You know, you have to go to school, you have to do certain things, and you can't control what certain people do to you, right? You can't control how other people treat you, but you can control your reaction. All you can control is the choices you make personally. That's what you control. You can't control what someone else does, but you can control yourself, and you can control the choices you make. So you have the freedom to make wise choices, right? Paul just said it right there. He said you can choose death and decay or everlasting life. Every time you have a choice, you can either make the wise decision, which sometimes means taking a little more time to think about it before you do something, or you can just make a selfish decision that will lead to death and decay. What? Okay, good. Okay, so Paul goes on and he continues to talk about this more in the book of Galatians. If you want to read it, you should check it out sometime. It's really, really a good book. And he goes on to tell you more about how when you start living this life of having the freedom to make wise choices, and you start making these wise choices, you're going to start experiencing more joy in your life. You're going to have a better life. You're going to live a better life. And better things are going to happen to you, right? It's what he was talking about with everlasting joy, right? That life that's going to come to you, some of it won't come until later, but it'll also start coming now. You'll start having good things happen to you now. You'll start being more joyful as a person. You'll start being more loving to other people. It'll start to just overflow out of you when you're making wise choices, right? So maybe you're sitting here and you think, I do make wise choices. Maybe that's what you're thinking in your head right now. You're thinking, I'm pretty smart. I make some wise choices, right? Maybe I make some like dumb mistakes every now and then. But for the most part, you know, I'm a good student, or I try hard, or I somewhat try hard. Or maybe, you know, you're thinking, you know, I have good friends. I don't hang out with the kids that are going to, you know, take me down the wrong path. Or, you know, you say no when there's things that you know you shouldn't do. You say no to those things. You don't watch things you shouldn't. You don't do things you shouldn't. You're thinking, I'm doing a pretty good job, but I'm not really feeling this thing that Paul was talking about. I'm not feeling like I have all these good things coming back to me. I feel like I'm planting good, but nothing good is happening to me, right? Maybe you feel like you're doing good work, but nothing's happening, right? That's where you might find yourself a lot of times, is that even when you're making those good choices, you're like, I'm not really getting the harvest idea. I'm not getting any tomatoes. And if you're not getting any tomatoes, the reality is sometimes it takes a while for those things to come, right? He's talking about an everlasting life, something that's eternal, which means sometimes it might not happen right this second, but it might be down the road in a few years. It might not be until, you know, you get a little bit older and then you realize, oh, all these good decisions I made really did set me up well for my future, right? And it's hard to think about that, and it's hard to think that far down the road. But if you start thinking like that now, then when you get there, you're going to be like, dang, I'm really proud of my 7th grade self for not screwing up my life. I'm really thankful for them for doing that, right? So that's why you got to think about your choices a little bit more, just a little bit more, right? Right now, you probably spend, 0 seconds thinking about a choice. Maybe just spend 5, just thinking, should I really do this? Should I not? Or maybe you're sitting on the other side of the spectrum. Maybe you're not making good choices, right? You're not really thinking about your decisions, and you know that some of your decisions are bad, but you don't really want to stop them because maybe they're fun, or maybe you like doing the things you're doing, right? And you feel like you're maybe on the wrong path, but you're also like, I'm in middle school. I've got a lot of time to figure it out. Well, that's true. You do. But the sooner you figure it out, the better off you're going to be, right? And the reality is, even if you've made the worst decisions in the world, right, which I'm sure none of you guys have, right? No, you haven't. There's definitely, you haven't made the worst decision in the world. It's never too late to turn around because Jesus has already forgiven all those poor decisions you've made. All you have to do is say, Jesus, I love you and I want to follow you. You just have to turn from your bad decisions and start walking towards Jesus and start making good decisions. It doesn't matter the bad decisions you made in your past. Those can all be forgiven. All of them are. Just start today by making one good choice, right? And then after one good choice, make another one, and then another one. Just a little bit at a time, you'll slowly start to see a change in you across the board. It'll be huge. I'm telling you right now. If you start changing just little decisions right now, it'll make a huge difference. We can talk after if you would like to learn more. Okay, don't worry. So there's a couple of questions you can ask yourself to kind of decide if you're on the right track or what you might need to do, right? So the first question to ask yourself is, what kind of seeds am I planting in my life right now? Okay? Think about, what kind of decisions are you making? Are you making pretty good decisions? If that's good, then keep doing that. Are you making poor decisions? Maybe you need to rethink of who you're hanging out with, or think about, maybe what you're doing at home when you're by yourself, or change just the little things. What do you need to change, right? And that's right into the second question, which would be, ready? What kind of seeds do you want to be planting, right? What kind of decision do you want to make? Think about what you want your life to look like in even 2 weeks. Where do you want to be in 2 weeks? Do you want to be happier in 2 weeks, or do you want to be sad? You probably want to be happier. Well, what kind of decisions can you make right now that are going to improve your life in the future? Even if the future is literally the next day. It could be as simple as, I'm going to empty the dishwasher today so that tomorrow my mom will be like, oh, great job, right? And it could be as simple as that. Wise decisions don't have to be that hard. It can be very simple. And lastly, this one is the most important, okay? Ask God for the wisdom, strength, and encouragement to make those choices, right? This is super important, because even if you think that you know how to make good decisions and you think that you're doing it, you're going to mess up, okay? So you need to ask God for the wisdom, strength, and encouragement, because we can't do it without God, right? Even the smartest person in the world, even Andy, who's a genius, that guy has a lot of wisdom, trust me. He asks God for wisdom, strength, and encouragement every day, because he knows that without God, he can't make those wise choices. We won't know what wisdom is if God's not there to show us, right? And it can be discouraging sometimes. Life is pretty hard, Things happen, your parents get divorced, or you get detention for something that you didn't do. Life gets hard, and you need that encouragement from God to keep going. Maybe you do make a bad choice. Well, you need encouragement from God to go back in the right direction, to make a good choice, to start moving the right way, right? And that's the beautiful thing, is you do have the freedom to make wise choices, right? You don't have to continue to make bad choices. Even if you've made a couple bad choices, that's okay. Everybody makes mistakes. You can turn around and go the other way now, right? You can move on, right? So think about in your life, in your situation, wherever you are in your life right now, whatever's going on in your world, in your family, in your home, with your friend groups, what's going on in your life? Think about that. And what is one wise decision you can make in your life right now? Maybe you've got a couple choices between something, or like, oh, should I go do this? Should I not go do that? Should I keep hanging out with these kids? Should I not? Think about it and think, what's the wise choice? What's going to benefit me? What's going to grow my relationship with God the best, right? Think about that as you're making choices this week, okay? I'm going to pray for us, and then we're going to be done, okay? So everybody, shh. Dear Lord, we want to thank you for this night. We thank you that you do give us the freedom to make wise choices. And we thank you that even when we don't make wise choices, you're there to pick us up and dust us off and help us get right back on track. We thank you for loving us and for showing us your love in so many different ways. We ask that you would just help us all to have a great rest of our weeks, and that we can just continue to make wise choices throughout the week. And we pray all these things, and everybody said, amen. All right, guys, 2 things we say every week. You are loved and prayed for, and you are accepted here just the way you are. Go in peace and serve the Lord, guys. If you want to talk to a leader or need some prayer requests, find one. They are all around. They'd love to talk with you. Have a good night, guys.